Good morning. It is Teacher Appreciation Week, and I am recording or pre-recording my first community-based workshop. I am offering these workshops for free. I give them online because one of our values is access at Heartwise Scholars, but I would love to give these workshops for free in person around the community locally if you're in Hampton Roads. And if you want to pay for travel, I'd love to give it to you for free. The presentation part, at least, for your community back home, wherever you are. But this is my Pros Social Community Series. This is a research that Heartwise Scholars, a nonprofit in Chesapeake, Virginia, is founded on. And we operate a one-room schoolhouse, relationship-based one-room schoolhouse. And it's our way of healing working families and building whole kids. So, Raising Heartwise Scholars. Our first workshop is Why Social Emotional Learning Matters. So let me move on to the next slide. Okay, so hi, I'm Dr. Goins. I am the author of the book When Relationships Matter, a social emotional approach to teaching and learning. And I wrote that book and started in 2019. I had been basically managing for relationships for 10 years at the time I wrote the book and built this approach to kind of protect the intellectual property that I've made in terms of developing a framework of expectations that my kids and I can both give into to be in relationship with each other. And I published that in 2021, which was in COVID times. So, what you didn't know about me if you met me in the classroom is I actually have five kids. I was pregnant with the fifth when it was COVID. And I just sent my eldest daughter into school in kindergarten. So she never actually had a normal kindergarten year. She got brought home March 2020, like the rest of the world. And this is when I became this woman right here, the resilient teacher mom. I realized a lot was going to change. And I had to kind of dig deep in terms of resiliency because she was the first I was sending to school and I was watching her kind of flail, all the virtual changes and just feel like so offended and kind of withdraw a little because she didn't have a normal childhood. So there are all those developmental experiences of play and like relationships. She was robbed of all that. And so she just became kind of an insecure mess. Even though she loved to learn and she loved school, but the idea of school was just, it was all over the place. So to better understand what to do for my children, since she was the first of, four more coming down the line. And my career was kind of, changing all the time. So even that needed some resiliency. I went back to school and studied the research of 21st century learning in ed leadership K through 12 at Regent University in 2020 all the way to 2024. I graduated from that program writing a dissertation on relationship-based classroom management and effects on teacher self-efficacy and job satisfaction for public school teachers K through 3. And so I followed teachers that I had trained previously through professional development who were using relationship-based management in their classrooms on whether it was helping them in terms of efficacy or belief in their ability to manage disruptive behaviors or manage, their classroom and whether it made them more satisfied with their job. And both of those factors proved to be high in terms of relationship-based classroom management. And so I wanted to put that to test when I graduated on my own kids. And so I opened a micro school with KaiPod Learning. In February 2024 is when I got accepted. Didn't know what a micro school was. But these children right here were who I was thinking of. And because we were working all the time, me and my husband actually gave in to private school. We went to public, transferred to another public. We came from a Montessori program. It closed. It was too small to open up back again in COVID. So that meant we had sometimes three or four different options for each of our kids to go into. And private schools seemed like a good bit because it went preschool all the way to high school, but it required us to have before and after school care on top of schooling. And the hard part with that is the best we could do for our kids was daycare essentially before and after school because of our long hours. And two, school, even in the private schools, wasn't always as consistent as we'd like as well. They also had large numbers because so many families were going to private school education because the public schools are still figuring a lot of things out in COVID. So as the numbers grew, it became less personalized. Also, they had the same problems with teacher retention. Doesn't matter what option you're in. That also is an issue in terms of staffing, keeping retained teachers and qualified teachers. And so again, even more of a reason why I took them home. So, microschooling is very different. We actually are a homeschool tutoring and enrichment program. We microschool with other friends because that was the aspect of school that I missed for my kids in traditional setting is that they would have more friends. So, we did it in our home right here. This is our first day of school in August 2024. We microschooled with four other friends. There are three in that picture. And this is Osiris. She's my Montessori teacher. And she took care of my preschool age kids, and I took care of the school age kids K through 5. Now, I actually own this learning center. That's a picture of me and my parents. I wrote this book. How I thought of this framework was actually inspired how I was raised in my family. I have two brothers, two sisters. My mom and dad worked multiple jobs. So they are the epitome of a working family, three or four jobs the whole time they were raising my family. And so me and my siblings had to be partners and we had to learn what it was like. But we always had high academic expectations because that's something that my parents had taught us. So that was the first time they visited our center. It was open by February 2025. And after being open a year, we look like this. Kind of funny. We've grown a ton. So I ended the first year of microschooling with 13 kids in the center and four at the house. Now we have closed down the house and combined our programs since all of our preschoolers are 5. And we serve 22 full-time, which is 4 days a week, homeschool tutoring kids. And that includes actually 16 families. So 16 families came together, were kind of like a homeschool co-op on steroids, with lots of love and relationships. And so this is us. There are 22 learners in the room, 16 families, and I have a 23rd learner as well that I do private SEL coaching with academic support. So this is our mission at Heartwise since the very beginning. It's to build a network of socially motivated scholars age 5 to 18 who take care of themselves, the community, and the world. It's really important. We start with self because we have no business being in a relationship with anybody else unless we can be strong in ourselves. And I actually deal with a lot of kids with confidence issues because they've been bussed around, including my kids. They went to 4 or 5 different school options. And what they really, really want is long-term relationships. They love talking about their people. They love being with people. They have some abandonment issues from COVID because people keep leaving. But we hope to, kind of build a steady, trusted network of scholars, so peers that will be there for each other, who can take care of themselves, the community, implying we want relationships for them to have in the community and the world. We want them to have a global impact as well. We are actually extending that mission, and that's why I'm online right now, because we would like to build a socially motivated network outside of a program. We would like to build Heartwise Scholars. We recognize in the second year it's a brand of child. Now that we moved and doubled the amount of kids we work with and doubled the amount of families we work with, and they're coming back for a third year, that our science, our research that we work this through can actually build hardwired scholars in any community option. And so the word is outreach. We became nonprofit for impact and for outreach, and we would like to extend our programming and offerings and training to other homes with other homeschool families, to churches. There's a lot of teaching and learning that happens in our faith-based communities. And so we would like to partner with you to help, have those relationships where teaching and learning coexist. We also would love to go to traditional schools who need more culture building, who need this kind of relationship built culture around them. And we would like to go to other micro schools because we know what it feels like to be so small that you depend on this community, that even one could close your doors. Well, how can you interact fluidly as a community so that you can be socially motivated to be there for each other where everybody truly belongs? So let's get started. What is the most demanding activity a child heart and mind does every single day, yet it's not tested, graded, or scheduled? Ta-da! Socialization. So within their family, over time, you think about it from infant all the way up to toddler, they get lots of time with their family, time to interact. And so they're given time to socialize. But once they go to school, once they go to the playground up here, I mean, instantaneously, they're called and tested their socialization skills. They have to think and they have to feel at the same time, and it can be kind of overwhelming. So nowadays, how do most children prefer to socialize? Well, the answer is this. Through the internet and social media, adults are the same way. There's less vulnerability, less risk. It's easier to go to the internet. There are multiple choices. It's easier to get that fix or feeling like you're connecting with people. But this is what our children are learning in terms of social habits in the real world. And so socialization becomes very tech dependent, whether they have to talk about a phrase or a show, just, to feel like they have something to say. It becomes tech dependent. And sometimes some kids can't even talk or interact with a kid without a device in their hand. So they, want to show them what they're doing. They, want to kind of have a leverage in terms of like a motivation for that child to engage with them. And so they'll need that tech-based resource to interact. The other thing is because when you're on the screen, necessarily there are no rules of engagement. You have total control of when you respond back. You have total control of when you're done with this conversation, you click off in a matter of seconds. You have total control of what you scroll and what you watch, and you don't even have to open your mouth. All the interactions become very passive. So, if someone's not listening or looking to you, really they weren't taught that they have to. If someone is not responding back to you in a conversation, really they're never taught that they have to until they want to. And so a lot of the rules of engagement when it comes to socialization in person aren't translated online. And so when you assume these children know, they don't, and they haven't been taught. And habitually, if they haven't been socialized, then it's really hard to kind of, teach or even motivate them to do anything differently. So, the other thing that really, really makes it hard, like even when I go, my kids are all in sports, multiple sports, baseball, football, soccer. And it's so sad the last couple years, I'd say the last 4 years, I'll sign them up for some sports team and just habitually every year I get an email that they don't have enough coaches. And a lot of the reasons why they don't have a lot of coaches are the passive interactions, but most of the time it's because it's the viewer-based attention. So kids, they do recognize that they want their peers' attention, but they'll get it the way that they've been taught on the internet, which is a lot of times not positive interactions that build those attentions. It's a lot of, stupid, excuse me for saying it and being honest, but just kind of like silly attention getting, like funny, even like kind of inappropriate behavior that gets the views or attention because what they're looking at when they see these reels, when they see these YouTube videos is the amount of clicks, the amount of followers, the amount of likes. And so these kids get driven by that. They attach it to money, they attach it to, in their head that that's the thought that these people are liked and they have friends. So when they do socialize out in the real world, they're really just looking for that, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me at any cost, which also fights a lot of true engagement and socialization. So this is what you end up with when, kids socialize in the real world like that. They get a little overwhelmed. And so sometimes this is the person who's practicing those social habits in the real world. They're feeling rejected, they're feeling less than. They feel worn out and overwhelmed because they're not getting the same sort of outcomes that, the internet almost tells them they should. They should get lots of likes for doing something stupid. They should get laughs, They shouldn't get in trouble when they're being passive because I do that all the time when I'm on my tablet or my phone. And then the tech dependent thing, it's just when they put down the device, those kids go away and they don't know how much to say. So there's that. It looks like this. But then it's the other side of well. It's the victims. It's the ones who are around that type of socialization, who don't give into that socialization, or that socialization hurts them, or they get really annoyed. They have all these emotions because they don't like being socialized like that. I took a survey in my we do a lot of polls informally in my micro school. And I remember one time because we were dealing with conflict, and a lot of the times they were being very passive towards the other adults in the room as well. And so we had to address it. And even some of the kids were getting into interpersonal conflicts. And so we had to address where those conflicts are coming. And if you got offended by a friend, I had to ask everyone to make a decision and to be open and honest. And we have these little brains we put in a bucket when they, have to share something that's vulnerable like this. And I said, well, when you get offended, do you one, speak up and say something? Two, do you keep it inside, but you just don't care? You just deal with it on your own. Or three, you get so offended that you keep it inside, but it really hurts you and you don't really want to be around those people anymore. I had like 80% of them say number three, that is why they don't want to be around people. They try to hold it in. They don't know what to do with the feelings. The feelings overwhelm them and becomes too much. And so it changed how we interact with each other, but it was so telling because we'll never see that the kids are feeling like this because it's usually they're going to keep it behind closed doors and they're not going to be honest with it, but doesn't make it okay. So, to function in the real world, you have to learn social skills. That's essentially the problem with it. The kids explicitly are learning their social skills on the internet, but they don't know how to interact in the real world. And really, socialization also comes with a lot of emotions, and so they have to learn social skills and emotional regulation. So this type of learning is called social emotional learning. So the top one right here is orange. That is the areas of self. And so again, part of our mission is that the scholars would learn how to take care of themselves. And these are the two areas in which we focus on. They have to be more self-aware. A baby is born and the baby cries when it's hungry or it's got a wet diaper. Same thing with a toddler. When the toddler grows self-aware, might throw a tantrum. There's something else that they want. So it's the same when they're cognizant to like make a decision and they're in their school age. They literally have to be more, even more so self-aware with their choices and their wants and their needs and their motivations. A lot of people don't know that they need to be kind of aware of their motivations. What are their beliefs and why do they do what they do? Then you have to go into the area of self-management. So now that you're aware, your goals, your feelings, your beliefs, your wants, and your needs, how do you manage it? It can be so overwhelming where you don't really feel like you are good enough or you don't feel like you can do that. So you have to be able to use your executive functioning skills and figure out ways that work best for you. So this is where we get caught up in like ChatGPT and the rumor mill, and my friend told me this, and I Googled this because you can get all that information if you want, and it can be overwhelming really quick. But then you've got to trial and error what strategies work for you, what supports actually work for you. And you have to manage those supports and be willing to choose those supports because they're best for you. So that is all self-management. Then you move into the areas where you're more socially aware. Oh, there's other people in the room. How am I going to function with these other people in the room? And so social awareness is when the kid kind of moves from like, this is me, this is what I want. But there's other people in the room. So can what I want coexist with what they want? And can I make some adjustments or can I cooperate with them just to make sure we're both getting what we want? And so social awareness is really key. I'll talk more about that. And then also, they need relationship skills. So even though those people are in the room, and I've been in multiple places where perhaps, socially we're all in different places, our social comforts, basically. And I've been in a room where they said, yeah, we're really social because they're in the room, but they never interact with each other. And really, that doesn't do anything for building community. That also doesn't do anything for those emotions inside that, challenge your own self-talk and also, apply the social skills you should be applying on a regular basis to keep a job, to, have friends. And so it's important to build those relationship skills. So not only are you in the room, but you're interacting with other humans. So this yellow is super important. It's the part that is kind of like our wheelhouse. But it's called responsible decision making. Unfortunately, part of the problem we have in engaging socially is, a lot of children, they struggle taking responsibility for their actions. And if they take struggle with responsibility of their actions, then they definitely are not self-aware or they choose not to be socially aware. And that's the reason why they won't manage and they won't engage in relationship skills. So I teach our scholars that everyone is a decision maker and it's one decision at a time and that every choice matters. And so responsible decision making is the glue behind implementing or implying all of these components. The benefits of self-awareness. We're only given 24 hours in the day. We all have different goals in life, and to not be lost in the sauce, it's important for us to be aware of our time that we have here in our lives and the goals that we want to put in front of us to live our best life. The benefits of self-management is that we can accomplish those things, but it comes down to the nitty-gritty executive functioning skills. Time management, organization, task management. And so that is what all of self-management is about, teaching the kids again towards what's best for them. Because even though that worked for their dad, even though they Googled that, they watched, someone on YouTube that did this, they can try it, but they ultimately have to choose and settle for what works for them. The benefits of social awareness. This is the hard part because a lot of the times it doesn't matter, especially if a kid has, kind of been self-focused for they don't have to care about anyone else. I deal with this a lot when it comes from like only child family. They're just really social awareness is new to them because it's usually only them. But once you become socially aware, you're in the business of having relationships. Those relationships, whether, acknowledged or not, is because a lot of those relationships are involuntary. There's something you need in this space or something, there's a reason why you're in this space. And so you did not choose to be in that relationship, but that relationship is necessary for, business to happen. So whether, that's a caregiver, a babysitter, whether you're going to church and, that ends up to be your children's church teacher, or whether, you are going to the UPS dropping off a package. And so there's a clerk that you have to talk to. So there, a lot of our relationships, being socially aware, are actually involuntary. There is something we need, and there's a person behind it that we have to interact with to get it. And then you have the voluntary relationships. The voluntary relationships and the health of the voluntary relationships actually are the things that allow us to have healthy involuntary relationships, because when we have healthy interactions with people we do choose, it helps us to learn different skills with people we haven't chosen to be in relationship with. Okay, relationship skills, super complicated. Every human is different. We all interact differently with each other. But this is kind of what it looks like. The little speech bubbles are there because a lot of relationships have to do with a lot of communication. So that's pretty much 90% of the job. The other parts are just learning how that person is to be respected and how you yourself want to be respected. And the other thing that keeps it together, especially in productive environments like schools, like churches, there are things you expect them to do or learn. Well, in productive environments like that, it's important that, it's very clear and what their responsibilities are in the relationship. So if there's unmet expectations, that's where it becomes kind of a communication breach. And so it's important that we are able to communicate with each other, but also understand what is respectful and responsible in terms of our interactions. So the glue that keeps that all together is the responsible decision-making piece, like I said, because it is actionable and it's applied constantly. And all these components kind of run together on a daily basis when you are social. So like I said, we're building that socially motivated network. So when you socialize, all of these components, all five are activated. And really, for it to work out well in a child's mind and heart, and even adults, you have to make one responsible decision at a time and stack them up and make a habit of those responsible decisions. And when you make a habit of those responsible decisions, we believe it's the heart and the mind working together. And we call that heart-wise decision making. So again, the need for decision making, I've explained it to you, but this is what we called heart-wise decision making. So for us, we teach this is a cognitive framework. It's inspired by 1 Corinthians 13. You don't have to be a faith-based organization to give into this. I actually use it in the public schools. Like I said, I am a faith-based woman, and I believe there's a verse in the Bible that talks about how every part has a function and that basically, there's no unimportant part. From the small parts to the big parts, we all work together. And that is where I made the acronym PART, because I was in a third grade class that was just there. That class had been left in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. And that's how I ended up with that job. It was after job cuts, and I just gotten married all across the nation. It was the only job available. And I observed them. They had so many interpersonal issues and a 25% passing rate, and they were learning nothing. And it felt like dangerous minds in there. And so I made up this acronym, like I said, because my parents worked all the time. And so me and my siblings had to do our part at home, and because we knew our responsibilities to the family. And my sisters and my brother as teens raised us, to do our part. And so part means to be prepped and ready, to have attitude awareness, to be respectful and responsible, and to exercise teamwork. And so I have taught this framework for over 10 years in a traditional classroom, and now 2 years in a micro school where we socialize all the time. It is uncanny how much we socialize. We just went on a strawberry picking field trip this week. And when we first opened the micro school, we went on an apple picking field trip in the fall. And it was my 5 kids, and like I said, 3 other kids and a teacher, and we took a picture in the field together. All right, so I actually just paused the video for a little bit. So I'm going to tell you the story about the strawberry picking because I have a picture right here. So this is kind of what we do and how I know this research works. And so I started in the home. This was our first field trip, and we were apple picking when I started in my home in the fall of 2024. And in the spring, literally this week, which happens to be Teacher Appreciation Week on the 5th of May in 2026. This is our community now. You know, socially motivated, and understanding that each individual to literally be a strong sense of self needs to understand that their part matters in this world. And when they make decisions based off on being prepped and ready, having attitude awareness, respectful and responsible, and teamwork, it really solidifies them being overwhelmed on what to do next. Then, when we manage them, and they each have their own individual learning plans, and then we literally cushion the option with lots of enrichments and social opportunities, there's just so much joy. And we extend our partnerships, all of us extend our partnerships because we all do our part. Whether we're staff, whether we're parents, whether we're children, we all do our part. And it ends up looking like that. So, what we are offering to the community now is just we would like more socially motivated scholars, children out there who understand their part in this world, and we'd like to strengthen their sense of self through part. And so that's why social emotional learning matters. We will teach the Heartwise decision making system. I'll tell you how we teach it. And knowing how to teach it is just a start because actually implementing it, you know, requires some consistency, but we'll teach you how you teach it and then how you support it with restorative practices. So the last workshop is on beyond rewards and punishments and how to restore that relationship when it's broken. Our professional learning options, because I love to train, like this is my purpose. This is what I'm called to share. I love teaching it to children. I think that's what I learned the most in micro schools. There's a gifting. I know this framework and this science so well, teaching children about the power of the heart and mind, teaching them about heart-wise decision making, and also using their social influence for good is a passion of mine. I also love equipping caregivers in the micro school world is more so who I've been working with, but my love is for teachers. I desire to transform classrooms with an interactionalist approach, and I would love to equip caregivers and teachers who work with children. To do so, I would have to teach you the science behind social motivational theory, heart-wise decision making, and social emotional learning with restorative practices. If you have families who need our services, especially in the Hampton Roads area, specifically in Chesapeake, we're in Greenbrier, here is what our homeschool tutoring enrichment program looks like. Also, we offer this summer enrichment program because we believe that we can serve traditional learners as well. And so to give them more social opportunities where they, recognize a strong self and are able to build that up only means that they're going to show up at your school, stronger and better and ready to invest in your community and eventually in the world. So this is who we are. If you scan that QR code over here on the business card, you'll get to our main website. If you scan this yellow code right here, you can actually contact me for further information about trainings, programming, even ask me a question. Thank you so much for listening.